Welcome everyone. So I'm so excited for this, and actually having you here, I'm thinking back to the last time that we were sitting in here having this conversation, and it's been, thank God, it's been many blessed years of friendship with you. So,
Someone asked me the question, where did we meet? I don't remember.
I don't know.
See, she doesn't remember either.
I don't know. I feel like I've just always known you.
It's been a minute. It's been a long time.
So welcome back together, folks. And I wanna say, for those who weren't here early in the service when I introduced or mentioned that Reverend Najuma Smith-Pollard is here with us. We've just been all torn up about what's going on in our country and specifically in our city.
Yes.
And it just seems like so much of what's broken in our society has been rearing its head in our own city in the last couple of weeks. It's nothing new, but it feels different. And in this moment, and if maybe even more fraught and a little bit more dangerous right now. And so given this incredible pain and tension that we're experiencing, we really wanted to just have you here as our friends and guests and sit together and break bread together. And so I'm just gonna welcome you once again, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. So this is Reverend Najuma Smith-Pollard, and she and Dee Dee and many of the friends that hopefully some of you have gotten a chance to meet tonight are from the Word of Encouragement Community Church.
Yes.
And I'll tell you that Najuma's formal role is one of them is at USC Center for Religion and Civic Culture, where Najuma's running the Center for Public Engagement. Is that what it's called?
It's the Center for Religion and Civic Culture. It's a long
Center for Religion and Civic Culture, and also leads programming for the Cecil Murray Center for Community Engagement.
Yes.
Okay. So, but she's also a pastor, and she's also an incredible speaker and an incredible preacher, and a beautiful author. And her voice is heard throughout the city in various ways. And I want to tell you that if you are willing to go into the heart of where the pain is in our city that is always striving and often hurting, you will find Najuma with her beautiful heart wide open in the center of the intersection, as she often is in the streets, really fighting for a more just and loving society. And you do it with incredible love, and I think with hope.
Yes.
Because I think that you, like me, actually believe that things can get better if we just get our act together.
Yeah.
And I've heard some of the most powerful preaching of my life come from this human that sits to my right.
Thank you.
And I'm always learning, always learning from you.
Thank you.
And I'm not the only one who is, because Vice President Kamala Harris is also learning from our dear Reverend Najuma Smith-Pollard, who came to have a session about reproductive health and reproductive freedom just before Roe was overturned. And if you, like me, unawares, opened up the New York Times the next morning or a couple of days later, you would have heard that that Kamala Harris was framing her response to the denial of abortion care in the name of Reverend Najuma Smith-Pollard. And I just felt like that is exactly the role that religion should play in politics.
Amen.
Right there. So so thank you for
Amen.
speaking always with love, and
Thank you.
we're very grateful for your friendship and for your leadership.
And I'm grateful for you. And the way we say it in the neighborhood is, you're dope as well. You're pretty dope as well. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. I really hope my kids were listening just now. So Najuma, I want to start. I just want to start with us sharing where our hearts are right now.
Yeah.
And I know that your heart is a
few places right now.
a little bit heavy right now. And so maybe we can just start, and let's name it, and then we can collectively hold this space.
Yeah. So my father lives in Bogalusa, Louisiana, and he was going to visit my stepmother in the hospital, who had surgery this week, and sadly had a heart attack in the bathroom at the hospital. So we thank God he was in the hospital, not in his car, not at the mall, not in the backyard by himself. He is not conscious and most likely will not come back to us. So me and my sister and brother who are here in Los Angeles will be traveling to Louisiana by Monday. So thank you. And Rabbi Brous in her kind heart, of course, said, well, you want to cancel? I said, no. Not because my heart isn't broken, it is. I am a daddy's girl, so all the daddy girls in the room, you understand. But this is important. And as I was telling members of my church, they didn't know either, but we took a van here. So when we got on the van, I shared with them what happened today. And I said, but I needed this community. You know, sometimes at the darkest moments, you need community. So I'm glad to be here with all of you and got a chance to be at, just settled in peace. And so thank you. And where my heart is with the city is broken too. The things that we all have seen, the rhetoric and the anti-Blackness, anti-this, it was just I told somebody, it was like nobody was off the table in that conversation that many of us have heard. If you've heard the full recording, it felt like it was like equal opportunity moment and nobody was off the table to get attacked. And it was really disgusting. And so I've been with several people, groups, of course, calling for the council persons to resign. And we know that 2 of them have not, but we're still believing and fighting and holding space that will happen. Because as many of you know, when a violation happens, the violator doesn't get to choose how the people heal, period. That's where my heart's at. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing about your father, and his name is Richard Smith,
Richard
and I want to invite us all to just hold him in our prayers, and especially in the coming days. And of the many things that I have learned from you is that even in the darkest hours, or maybe especially in the darkest hours, you are finding God's voice and you're hearing the call. Yeah. And I know that you will in the days ahead too. And I just really bless him with ease and comfort, and bless you and your brother and sister, and your stepmother. Yeah. That you should all find ease in the days ahead.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We received that. Thank you.
I want to add to this in addition to the city council tapes and the resistance from still 2 of the city council members to resign in light of these tapes. One of the things that I'm holding in my heart is fear and concern about what happened to Paul Pelosi this week.
Yes.
The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's husband, was violently attacked in their home, and I can't help but feel like we just reached a new low that's indicative of the new lows that are to come.
Right.
And it's not just because of the violence, it's because of the response to the violence, because there've been times in our history and there've been times in the last couple of years where things have been bad. And then there was a kind of quick cleanup, like, this person doesn't represent, and we need to take, there are ads with gunmen targeting Pelosi that haven't been taken off the air. Right. And I just, people are like, but the ad wins. Why would I take it down? Mm-hmm. The election's only a week away. And I'm just, that worries my heart. Yeah. I wonder when as I spoke about tonight, the rhetoric of violence meets a violent culture, a culture with access to guns. Right. That really concerns me, and it feels like all the more reason for us to really double down on the work that absolutely has to happen. As much as I'm bracing for next week, like I think we all are for our own elections, I think if we do not do everything in our power to transform this culture of political violence that we're living through in this moment, then I think we're headed into a very treacherous period ahead. So I'm also holding that. In addition to this, I mean, this not only from the city council, but there've been a spike of anti-Semitic attacks and incidents over the course of the last several weeks. In my analysis, in my kind of mental framing of this, when did I start becoming occupied with, again, with the thinking about anti-Semitism? Because it kind of, you know, our attention moves from thing to thing, but it was when the former president made a threat to American Jews who couldn't get behind a right-wing Israel policy, and it went straight from there to Kanye, and then it went to Kanye doubling down, and then to Kanye tripling down, and then to this response, and all of that was right on the heels of the city council, and you know, and I also recognize in this moment, it's something I want to talk a little bit about with you, the way that anti-Black racism works and the way that anti-Semitism works, and how they're different, and how they're similar, and what we need to understand about both those things. Because I think that I feel like we're all getting some lessons in anti-Semitism in real time over the course of the last couple of years, a greatly misunderstood form of racism. And so I want to really think that through together. And my sense is when things start to get really loud, that we have to quiet the alarm bells so that we can actually think clearly and listen in addition to speaking. So that's some of what I'm hoping we'll be able to do together tonight.
Yeah, so what I want to, and thank you for that. So when you think about anti-Semitism and anti-Blackness, so I'm going to go back to the city council, where you have conversation around redistricting that limits power for a segment of people. And while those words may not sound racist, right? Because the N word wasn't used, or, you know, tropes weren't used.
It was almost,
but it was very, very,
she got
very
really
close.
close. She got
very
really
close. Right, very close. And so some people who, when they hear it, they're like, oh no, that wasn't racist because certain words weren't used. What has to be understood, and it's the same when we talk about anti-Semitism, is that whole conversation around diminishing, taking away, stealing power from people is in alignment with white supremacy, because that is the goal of white supremacy, is to take power, steal power, deny you power because of who you are, because of your who-ness. And so when, as a Black woman, when I hear certain things, even if I don't hear the N word or the words that we have, you know, categorized as racist, the intention and the spirit behind certain things and statements and activity is in alignment with white supremacy, and that's what makes it racist. And that's the part that a lot of people have a hard time kind of negotiating, because they're looking just at the word or the words and not really seeing the spirit behind it and the intention, and that becomes very problematic. So even, you know, there are people that say, well, they didn't say certain things. Yes, but their activity and their actions was in alignment with white supremacy. And that is problematic for me. But also, as I tell other people, where I live on my block, it's not just Najuma, the Black woman. There are other people on my block. So when you limit my power because you have a problem with my who-ness, and we're talking about city council, then you're limiting power for everybody else in my community. So we all are impacted, even though it may not sound that way or look that way. And that's why we all have to say, no, that's not okay. We all have to say no, and that's not okay also. Because at the end of the day, it impacts all of us, and none of us, because we live in a community, like it or not. You may not like your neighbor, but you're in a community, and vice versa. And we are in this thing together.
You know, I gave a sermon a couple weeks ago where I was talking about how it might be hard for us to understand why this is a manifestation of white
Mhm.
supremacy, especially because the people who said those terrible things were not white.
Right.
And yet it was a white supremacist ideology that was driving it, because it was about a zero-sum assumption about
Yes.
power, that if
Right.
Black people and tenants have power, then they're taking power
From everybody
away
else. Right.
from other people. And afterwards, at Shabbos lunch, someone said, it's really hard for a lot of white people to understand white supremacy,
Mhm.
because it's just, it doesn't make sense. It's not like
Right.
a formulation that is natural or instinctive. And so how do you get white people to get behind the fight against white supremacy?
Right.
And we talked a little bit about Heather McGee and the book Some of Us, and the whole idea that whites, and have many people here read the book? We did a book group at ICAR about it, and a bunch of folks have read it, and
Mhm.
The Some of Us.
Mhm.
And she tells one of the stories that's told in the book is about how about when desegregation orders came, that in several white townships and towns throughout the country, rather than desegregate their public pools and have their white children swimming with Black children,
Right.
they just filled the pools with concrete.
Right.
There was no more swimming. And either they were wealthy enough to build their own pools and then their kids could still swim, or their kids just didn't learn how to swim anymore. And so that's like just a very, it's one of the
Absolutely.
most powerful demonstrations that I've heard of the way that white supremacy was hurting white people.
Absolutely.
Right? It's because it's not a zero sum.
No.
And so I think a lot lot about that.
Absolutely.
And actually, it
Yeah.
connects to Kanye also
Yeah.
in some ways, because when Kanye goes out in public wearing a White Lives Matter t-shirt
Mhm. Mhm.
and talking about slavery the way that he has,
Absolutely.
and talking about, that is, he's regurgitating white supremacist
Right.
talking points.
Right.
So even like and I believe that Jews can actually engage in anti-Semitic tropes too.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, because the ideas are, regardless of who's speaking them,
Right.
the ideas have power.
Absolutely.
And something that Brooke and I were talking about as we were thinking about tonight, and Brooke said, racism is prejudice plus power.
Yes.
Like the place where prejudice meets power is where racism is. And so I think that's something interesting and important for us to think about. Also, by the way, as the Supreme Court hears the arguments about affirmative action, this is also going on in the backdrop
Right.
of this conversation too.
And what ends up happening is, the White Lives t-shirt, White Lives Matter t-shirt, and other things that we've been seeing filling the media, back to the point about violence, what it ends up being, and we saw it, to your point about the freeway, it becomes a calling card for those who are waiting for someone to blow the whistle to go out and attack. So how many of you know about double dutch? How many? I know my folks know. How many of y'all know what double dutch? Y'all familiar with double dutch? So with double dutch, there you go. Okay. So somebody's turning a rope, right? There's people turning a rope. But the thing about double dutch is you don't just jump in, but if you know on double dutch, there's someone on the side waiting for their turn to jump in. If I'm twisting white supremacist ideology with the words that I speak and the activity, what I'm doing is I'm giving you an opportunity to just jump. And that's when we see the freeways. That's when we see the Nancy Pelosi's attack. That's when we see people getting really harmed physically, emotionally, psychologically, because it's the turning of the thought, of the ideology in the ways it's turning and the ways we've seen it turn, whether it's a tweet or an Instagram post or all the things that we've been seeing at city council meeting. And so as these ropes are being turned, those who actually have access, will, which is really hard to harness, intention, they're just waiting for a moment to jump in and do violence. And that's where it gets real. And so the folks who are turning the ropes, I'm just turning ropes.
Right.
Yeah, you turning ropes. But for people who like the double dutch, you know, some folks, if you put some double Dutch ropes in front of us, we like, oh, double Dutch, okay.
Yeah.
That's what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. Such a powerful image. And I've been thinking so much about this in the last couple of weeks. What Derek Black said, Derek Black, who was the son of the Grand Wizard of the KKK, and his godfather was David Duke, and he was this young white nationalist who ended up getting invited to a Shabbos dinner after another Shabbos dinner after another, and he ended up, if you don't know the story's incredible. But what I've been thinking about that he said, because he essentially disavows his family ultimately, but he said that Charlottesville in 2017 was the single most important day in the history of white nationalism in America, because that was the day that the most powerful political figure in the country failed to condemn the violence and say, step away from the ropes, right?
Right.
And so as a result, I think part of why we're not seeing people back away from the Paul Pelosi now and say like, oh my God, I made a mistake here. I got too close. I got caught up with my rhetoric and I'm going to pull back. But instead they're like, no, we're here.
Yeah.
Because something that was always under the surface just came right out.
Yeah.
And many people wrote after Charlottesville, these guys weren't wearing their white hoods because they didn't need to hide anything.
They didn't have to hide.
They understood that they did not need to hide in this moment. And I was surprised
Right.
by that. And
yeah, and so even what we see Kevin De Leon's doubling down, tripling down, to your point about not resigning, he's also in that vein of, I'm not going to hide. I said what I said about you. Deal with it. And you're going to keep paying me. And I'm going to keep my job. And you're going to have to deal with it. And so he didn't have to run and hide, because we have people who keep the ropes turning. So part of our task, all of us, is to make sure that individually we're not part of the turning of the ropes. Like, all of us have to make sure, like, am I fueling these ropes? Am I turning ropes? And when I see someone doing that, if I have opportunity to ask to get them to put their ropes down. If otherwise people like double Dutch, they just looking for an opportunity to jump in.
I think that's, in some ways, this might be one of the blessings of this last several years, is really the centering of anti-racism training and even anti-racism language, and the whole recognition that it's not enough to not be a racist. You have to be an anti-racist. You have to actively be learning and interrogating and trying to understand the ways that this is built into our systems. And I'm so appreciative of it. I'm appreciative of how uncomfortable I am in those conversations, because I know that I'm better afterwards. So I know that that's the way that we're not inadvertently contributing to this problem. And, we talk a lot about this at ICAR, but one of the things that I really learned about anti-Semitism that I didn't know about anti-Semitism is the role that it plays in white nationalist ideology.
Yes.
And so I'm just going to say this for anyone who hasn't heard me give this sermon 15 times in 15 ways over the last 6 years. But what I learned from my friend Eric Ward, who I think really kind of broke this story in an incredible article called Skin in the Game, which if you haven't read, you should read. He's a Black civil rights and human rights activist, an organizer who embedded with white nationalist organizations, and they let him do it because he said that he was also a nationalist and that he felt that there should be separation between the races. And so they embraced him, but immediately started talking to him about the great Satan, which was, us. And and what he realized, to his own surprise, and certainly to ours as he started to share this, is the way that the role that anti-Semitism plays at the heart of good old American white nationalism, because part of their racist ideology is that people of color aren't going to be sophisticated enough or smart enough to be able to overcome the systems of oppression that have been designed to control and contain Black bodies. but the Jews are smart and sophisticated and have evil intentions and can move the chess pieces and make all these, essentially replace the,
Right.
the white America. And that is something that I did not know until
Yeah.
Eric Ward shared it. And I was, it was 2017. I'd already been a rabbi for 16 years. And I did not know that that was part of the way that anti-Semitism, that the anti-Semitism
within, yeah.
functioned inside
Yeah.
the society. And so here we are talking about fighting racism over here and fighting anti-Semitism over here, when really it's one struggle.
Yeah.
This is one fight.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I've always heard this from you too.
Yeah.
I've always seen this, like the way that we can't fight on our own oppressions, but we fight collectively because
Right.
we have a collective interest in one another's
Absolutely.
liberation, because we love and care about each other, and we understand that our own liberation is tied up in one
Absolutely.
another's liberation.
And that's that piece that a lot of people miss, is that, and it's kind of like with Black folks, the Black community, it's like, I don't want you to get power. With our Jewish brothers and sisters, it's, I don't want you to have too much power. Because if you have too much power, then we can't control. And so it's this constant battle. And to your point, it's white supremacy is about power. It's about power. And absolute power corrupts. Absolute. And that's what the ideal of white supremacy is: absolute power. Absolute power over people, absolute power in government, absolute power in regions. And that's what we are all actually fighting against. But it has so many different faces and masks and colors and schemes and prints. It's hard to identify always, but something I had a conversation with someone about. If you can focus on where the power struggle is, then you'll find it. If you get caught up in little small details like who said this, or the fights that are like on social media that they want you to get caught up in. But if you can focus on the power, like where is the power struggle, then you'll find it. And you're like, oh, I get it. It's the thing in city council. It's not about Latinx and Black folks. It was about power. What's happening in DC, it's not about Republicans and Democrats, it's about power. And that's what we all have to kind of like pay attention to, is the power struggle. It's all about power.
I wonder if we can
And the aim for absolute power. Yeah.
I want to ask us, and if it's okay, I'd love to open it up for a couple. We'll have time for a couple of questions, and then I have one final question for you. But one thing I want to ask you is, well, first, the Jewish community is a very diverse community. I think there's a misunderstanding or misconception that the Jewish community is made up of white Ashkenazi Jews, like Jews from Eastern Europe or Central Europe. Actually very diverse. And what we've learned over the years is that 12 to 20% of American Jews are people of color, which is really really remarkable. And so I want to just start by sort of naming the misconception about Jews. But I wonder if I can ask you, if as a pastor, is there something that you'd want the Jewish community to know? And then I'll answer too, like, what do I wish that people who weren't Jewish knew about my people? And if you, as a Black pastor, is it like, what do you wish that people who aren't Black Christians, for example, knew and understood about your community that might help make our way together in an easier and more blessed way?
Oh, that's a big one. The thing that's coming to me immediately is that there's no such thing as Black on Black crime. So Black people do not wake up every day intentioned to hurt Black people because there's a defect in Black folks that we've got to hurt each other. And I say that because the way that racist narrative plays is it excuses everyone from, or not everyone, but it helps people be excused from supporting, advocating, speaking up with the Black community when there is anti-Blackness, when there is racism, because what often comes out of people's mouths and what's played on media is, well, they kill themselves anyway. Because you know, Black on Black crime, please, there's no such thing as Black on Black crime. It's a horrible racist narrative. If I live in any other area, the people that it's just crime happens locally, it just does. But what has happened is that that narrative plays into a much bigger narrative, and people feel like, I don't have to help the Black community or be a part of their struggle or advocate or support because they hate themselves anyway, and they kill each other. And it's just not true. I don't care, be very clear, the numbers of crimes that the media plays is very small compared to the density of our population. Not to excuse it, not doing that at all, because my own family is a victim of crime, violent crime. However, be very clear, mothers want their children to go to school safely. Parents want their children to be safe coming and going. We all want to sleep good at night. And the majority of the Black community is not trying to kill other Black people. So when there's opportunity for our Jewish brothers and sisters to be a part of the anti-Black, racist stuff happening, be a part of that if you can, however you can. And please don't suggest that or allow that narrative to play in your mind. Well, they kill each other anyway, they don't like themselves, so why should we help? It's not true. It just isn't true. So that's what's coming up for me with that question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. The majority, the majority and the huge majority of us we want the same thing everybody else wants: peace, harmony, love, family, good vacations, nice cars, all those things. Yeah.
I wish you didn't even have to say that,
I know. I wish I didn't have to either.
but thank you for saying it.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you.
for letting me say it.
I think one of the things that I wish that people who weren't Jewish understood about the Jews is the particular way that Jewish trauma works and that Jewish vulnerability works, because I think that people look at us in a kind of snapshot in time as a community that in America in this moment have accumulated some power and some wealth and some privilege, and in general, not, obviously not everyone. But there was a time a couple of years ago when the three mayors of the three biggest cities were all Jews, and it was like, oh my God, I'm not there's some Jewish pride, but also like, oh, I hope nobody notices, right? Because but what I think I wish people who weren't Jewish understood about Jewish history is that all of that accumulation of like power and resource, and it doesn't save us when people turn against us. And that's just the lesson that we have learned again and again and again throughout history. And so I think there's a kind of embedded sense of vulnerability when people from the outside might look at us and think that we're invulnerable. They might think, what are you worrying about? Look at you, look what you've got, And we feel like in an instant, everything can change. Like, so we're kind of the way that this version of racism lives is that everything usually is kind of okay. And then all of a sudden, it's 1933. And so we have to try to, I think, and, it's not a joke that like lots of Jews struggle with anxiety. And I think part of it's because of our history. It's like, what does it mean to live and know that even when you're okay, you might not be okay tomorrow. And so I say that because I just wish that was something people understood. Like if we were a little more tenderhearted toward one another, and I think maybe people would understand anti-Semitism and why Jews freak out about anti-Semitism when it might not seem like such a big deal. And there are lots of people who face a lot of hate crimes and a lot of challenges. And so why are Jews seemingly so on edge all the time? And it's not just because there are a lot of hate crimes against Jews, but it's also because of the nature of Jewish history and Jewish trauma and Jewish vulnerability is that we're A-okay until we're not. So any, bunch of couple guys on the 405 could be a harbinger of something to come. Or it could just be a couple of, drunk guys on the 405. Like we don't know. And so we're very fraught with concern about it all the time. I don't know if that resonates with any of the other Jews in the room, but I think that's okay, good.
Yeah. And I think, and I think that's where we share, unfortunately, is shared anxiety, because at any given moment, the police could kill someone in my community, right? Or any given moment, my son could be targeted because he looks just like whatever, right? So I think that's where we also have opportunity to build, is because we do have this shared anxiety of how racism keeps showing up in our communities, maybe differently, the way it kind of comes in, but there's this shared anxiety. Now, I heard someone say, and I'm just sharing, I'm not agreeing with them, I'm just sharing you what they said, and my rebuttal to them was, because they said, well, there's just a really low bar for anti-Semitism. And I said, well, there should be a low bar for anything that's racist. Like, as long as you don't, like, we can take it up to here. Like the bar should be low for any kind of racism or anti-anything. It should be low, because the minute we say it's too low, then what I'm really saying is, I want you to take more.
Right. You can tolerate.
Take more, and then when it gets here, then you can get pissed about it.
Yeah.
Huh? That's where we are. Take more. Keep putting it on, and that's what the feel of this season is like. Even with Kevin De Leon, it's like, well, I only said the bar is low. I didn't say that much.
Yeah.
So we should have waited until you said more. Okay, let's run the tapes. Say some more, and then you let us know when you said too much.
Right.
And then we'll get pissed. I think we should keep the bar low on anti-anything. Anti-humanity should be very low. That we grow as a human race to not hate and have expressed disdain for others. The bar should be low. Because the minute I say the bar is too low, then what I'm really saying is you should wait until it's really bad. Then you can have an attitude about it.
Right.
And that's pretty sick thinking.
Also,
that's like an abuser saying, I only hit you once. Oh, I was supposed to wait till you give me a third time. Okay, my bad. 2 more pops. Yeah, no, it's sick. Yeah, it's not okay.
If I would love to know what's on all of your minds, or at least how about 2 of your minds? Does anyone have a question? Mr. Scott Schulman, hello.
This is a week where we really need some positivity. Is there something in the last week or 2 weeks or month that really made you feel good?
I shared something with my table.
Yeah.
That went really well. And and so I say, well, so all that I'm expressing in this space, because I'm hopeful that these conversations will lead to all of us collectively better understanding one another, but more importantly, better understanding ourselves, and that it leads to community leads to love. It leads to whatever changes each of us needs to make day to day. And I think we're all growing, you know. So the positivity is that these conversations, I believe, create hope. I don't know how long that takes, but I do believe they happen. And I did have something really amazing happen this week, by the way. You want me to tell you? Should I tell them? Because when I told my table, they were like, ah. So we've all had the experience where you go someplace and you're standing in line and you get to the check-in, you get to the front counter, you get to the door, and they tell you things like, we don't have your name, we don't have your appointment. You've been there before, we didn't get your payment. And you're like, I did all the things. Well, that happened to me this week. So I was taking care of something really important for me and my kids. And the lady's like, we don't have your appointment, we don't see your name, you can't be seen, we can't help you. And some spirit said, just pause. So I just paused. Spirit said, now ask for a supervisor manager. So I say, is there a supervisor or manager I can talk to? She says, yes, I have a supervisor and I can call her, but she's going to tell you the exact same thing. We cannot see you today. So no problem. Just ask her. So she calls the supervisor, and I have now turned my back against the door, so I don't see who's coming out. But I hear these words. So she calls the supervisor. So I hear these words. Is that my pastor? Is that my pastor? The supervisor was one of my members at my church. And I actually shared that on Instagram and it went viral. It's actually almost at 15,000 views. And what my table helped me understand is that because we've all had that experience when we're at some place and they tell us you can't get in, we can't see you, your appointment isn't verified or whatever. But it's like this ounce of justice because the supervisor was someone that knew me. And so that was my bright moment of the week. Your turn.
Great. That's great. Now I think we leave it at that. Beth, do you want to ask a question? Great. Oh, hold on a sec. Brick's gonna bring you. Thank you.
So when you were talking about double dutch and people just waiting to jump in, I've always thought about people who are afraid of giving up power as so people who don't have any. It's not the people who are in power, it's the people who don't have any. And then when the ropes start going, then they go, oh, that's why I don't have any power.
Mhm.
It's because the immigrants are taking my jobs. It's because the Jews run the world. It's because of all this stuff. And so it's not people who already hold the white supremacist views who are waiting to jump in. It's for people who are dissatisfied and they're looking for an explanation aside from where they don't have to take responsibility for why they don't have any power, why they're not making as much money as they wanted, why they don't see themselves, why they're starting to see themselves less and less represented in government or whatever it is. But they're not happy with the amount of power that they have. And then the ropes start, and then they use that as an explanation.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And the huge amount of entitlement that comes with that thought and that mindset, because the entitlement is, I should have the power that I think you have. Whether you have it or not, I should have the power that I think you have. That's a grave amount of entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do agree with you. And that sometimes is the most dangerous person. I think of Ahmaud Arbery, the men that killed him.
Mm-hmm.
They were individuals who didn't really have much power, but they also felt entitled to exercise power that they actually didn't have, and felt very entitled. So you're right, but there's a dangerous entitlement that's even behind that. That's really scary. because when I feel I actually have what you have, even though I don't, whether you have it, I have it or not, but I'm willing to go whatever lengths to take whatever power I think you have, it's really dangerous. And that person's probably the most dangerous because they actually don't have much to lose. Yeah.
I mean, I think that means they're good. They're good learners, because this is what, I mean, this is the history of racism in America, was teaching poor white people that they had to be better than somebody. Otherwise they were going to rebel against wealthy whites. And so it's, you know, it's precisely, I think, going to people who have little power and pointing the finger at somebody else who dares to jog down the street like a free man, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's very powerful. You know, we're getting close to 9. So what I'm going to do, I want to ask you a final question, and I'm sure there's a lot that's stirred up here, and I love that, but I want to also respect people's time, and especially yours, because you've had a hard day.
Okay.
I want to ask you what your vision of the beloved community is. And did folks hear my question? What's your vision of the beloved community? And I want to ask, as you take a moment to think about, I want to ask all of us to think in our own minds what the beloved community could be for us, and see if we hear any echoes or resonances in each other's vision here.
You want them to ask at the tables, or?
You want to take a minute? Talk to someone next to you for a moment? It's okay. It's okay. Turn to each other. Let's do it. Let's do it.
You got 30 seconds.
You got 30 seconds.
We're not going to be here all night. And maybe one person from a few tables can just shout out their vision. And maybe like 1 word or 2 words. Let's do that. I mean, I share my thoughts, but. So pick somebody at your table who's going to share the vision in 1 word or 2. I'm good.
Okay, let's pull it back together. So why don't we let's hear a couple words. What are the words that emerged for you when I asked that question? Let's just hear a couple words, and then we're going to hear Reverend Najuma's, and I'll tell you mine. Yeah, go ahead.
Something that's very, looking at something that's that people want to be a part of. That it's not just doing it in my own little way, that this is something that's important, and every piece, every one of us is important, and that's what makes the whole so wonderful. And that somehow we have to come together in that.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. I think
you.
the essence of what you're saying is about collectivity and connectivity, right? Something about helping connect us to the broader collective. Can we do just 1 word, like pop up? Because again, we're going to close. So just like when I say beloved community, what do you envision? What's your dream of what's possible in our society? Do you have a dream? You have a dream. Just I mean, I was going to say, where everybody's treated by the supervisor as though they are your beloved pastor, right? Everybody.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Beloved pastor status for
Everybody has
everybody.
pastor status.
Yeah.
I love it.
A word.
Easy walkout. I like
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
it. Over here. Interface.
Yeah, we got to do this together, folks. I'm sorry.
Together.
There is no way forward except together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Respect and embrace.
Respect and embrace each other's differences, right? Like the ways that we're different. It's not about pretending that we're the same, but actually honoring and lifting up what's different about us. Beautiful. Yeah. Andrea said reciprocal compassion. That's so
like it.
beautiful. Thank you. Okay, one last one. Love. Do you want to share yours?
Yeah. So my vision is the word I'm going to lean into is belonging. That everyone knows that they belong, but not just knows it, but feels it that they belong. So that's my vision, is belonging, that there's this overwhelming sense of belonging.
Mm. And I mean, part of my vision when I think of beloved community, I think about a particular intersection downtown at a protest in the middle of COVID after the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and this sacred space that you and a few of our partners in the work established so that we could grieve together, and so that we could hold accountable the people who are causing so much pain in this world. And then the way that you made space not only to honor those three beloved people whose lives were taken, but you invited in the non-Black clergy that were there to support, and you brought us into a sacred conversation with you. And I feel like there was some kind of holy harmony that happened in that moment. And for me, it was a transformative moment just to see your leadership, to see how you in the center saw everyone in the periphery and recognize that all of us together and only together, we're going to be able to make our way through this really difficult time. And I'm so grateful to you for that. And I hope, I mean, if I may be so bold, maybe one day we could come to your church.
I said that. Didn't I say that? I said it at my table.
I think a lot of our folks might want to come for a visit on a Sunday morning. And
I said it at my table. I said, and now we have to get you all to come on a Sunday to Word of Encouragement Church.
I would love it.
So we're going to arrange that.
And you are an honorary member of Hikar in my mind, and a great teacher here. And I hope you'll make your way back again and again and again, baby. Let's do this.
Yes. I love you.
As a little Lionel Richie, I just brought in there for some reason. So I thank all of you. Thank you for being here tonight and being a part of this conversation. This is an ongoing conversation. And I want to say, just one last thing, which is, I'm a New Yorker. I'm from New Jersey, honestly, truth be told, but I lived in New York for 12 years, the formative years. And then I came out here and really became a part of the city when I started getting involved in the multi-faith justice work in the city. And I feel like for all of us who are struggling with this sense of polarization and division and fear and loneliness and worry, we have to step more deeply into the work. We just have to get more deeply into the work. And so thank God for Brooke Wirtschafter, our director of community organizing. We have an amazing Minyan Tzedek team of people who really are deeply in the work, who are leading and who are standing side by side with our partners every day. And we want all of you to be part of it too. And as I keep saying, the only way through this is together.
Amen. Can I do one thing before we close, and we can close out on this? I'm going to ask Dee Dee to come back up. Come on, Dee Dee. And I'm just going to ask her to just give us something to close out on. And then when you're done, we're done.
While Dee Dee's making her way up, I'm reminded of one of my favorite teachings of Reverend Najuma Smith-Pollard when she was asked right here in this spot, the year was like 2017, if we were all invited to go to Washington, D.C. to bless the president, what would we do? And I said, nothing in the world could get me on that plane. And you had a different answer. Do you remember?
I would gladly go and lay hands on him. Just pour the oil. Come here, baby. Let's anoint that head with oil. And I'm still willing to go. But they haven't come. This is Dee Dee Foster. She's not only my friend, she's a recording artist, but she's just got this voice. And so in our tradition, we sing out. We leave church, we sing out. So I'm just going to give us a little, whatever's on your heart, Dee Dee, and then we can be done? Yeah. Okay. Oh, you got a mic right there. Whatever, this ad lib, whatever's on your heart.
Love.
Okay.
Love. May you all go in love. May you all go in peace. May we all meet again one day. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. God bless you. Thank you, Mom.